What's up, everybody? Today, we're going to put Nathan in the spotlight because this is his area of expertise. We're getting away from the technical stuff as far as cameras go and lenses go and editing goes. Now we're talking about actors, but not necessarily trained actors, untrained actors. These are people that our clients are asking us to put in front of the camera. These could be employees, it could be customers, it could be clients of our clients, tests for testimonies and interviews and things like that. Nathan is a trained actor. He's got a lot of experience in that world, and he's the director on all these projects, right? He's really good at orchestrating all the pieces, and he's very client-facing and client-focused. And most of the time, he's the one doing the interviews, right? He's interviewing all these people. And so what I want to know, and the questions that I'm going to ask, I'm going to turn the tables on Nathan. We got to ask Nathan, like, okay, everybody's got to know, this experience, right? Everybody's got this experience. I have a client that's asked me to get a testimony from one of their clients, maybe a lawyer or something like that. That happens a lot, right? Yeah. Attorneys will reach out and be like, hey, I have a client. It was a successful case. I want them to do a testimony for me. Can you interview them? And that's it. That's all they're going to say, and then that's where you come in, right? So walk me through that process, man. Like when the client is saying basically that, hey, Nathan, here's one of my clients. They're going to do a testimony for us. We just want them to talk about maybe some bullet points and we trust you with the rest. Then what do you do? What is that process like for you from start to finish? Go.
Well, saying I'm an expert in this is that might be a stretch, but I've had the opportunity to work as an actor in front of the camera, and then also had the opportunity to move behind to direct. But yes, Jacob, you know this too well. A lot of commercials, and especially if it's a regional commercial, sometimes you don't have the budget to hire, go through agency or hire an actor or actress. And so many times we have the client meetings and they're like, so-and-so, we're going to put them on camera. They don't have any experience, but I'm sure they'll do okay. So, I'm like, yes, I've had many of those opportunities, and it does help because, when I was first starting acting, I was so scared. I'd see camera. I think the more people you saw on set, the more nervous you would get. You'd see the bigger cameras, you would see all the grip and the DP,
the light, the boom, mic
boom mics right in your face.
That was usually the tipping point. That's the tipping point, right? Like every time I've interviewed somebody, they see the cameras, they walk in, everything's good, and then you adjust the mic, and then it goes. Right. They're like, oh my god,
right.
Is that thing listening? Yeah.
And it's wild. It's actually, and I tell people, this a lot is, it's actually harder, in my opinion, to, do interviews and to, to be kind of free flowing than it is to kind of be in becoming a character. Because a lot of times when you become a character, you have that opportunity to lose yourself in that role. And sometimes you kind of just block out, everybody around you, and you're so focused on obviously delivering your lines and your performance, and everything else just kind of is a blur. But when you're giving an interview, or when you're trying to talk in front of people that doesn't have a lot of experience, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So what I've learned over the years is a lot of times you don't hear me, when I give these interviews to people. It's just kind of have a conversation with them, start it off where you're just talking with them. You'll say, we'll say a little small action, we'll clap it, but it's more or less just having a dialogue. And I try to, if I can, make a couple cheesy jokes or something, to kind of lighten the mood up.
Loosen them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to loosen them up a little bit.
Yeah. And that typically can work a little bit in your favor. But when you come at them, with hard questions in the beginning, they tend to lock up. But for me, when I'm asking the questions, it's just about having a dialogue. It's just having fun, having a conversation, kind of like how we're just having a fun conversation now instead. And then, I'll try to kind of squeeze in the question as we're having a talk, having a conversation. So that usually helps loosen up.
That's a good point you made, squeezing in the question as you're talking. And it was so funny because I guess it kind of takes some level of acting in a sense to have you almost want to, it sounds bad to say you're faking a genuine conversation, but you can't just ramble with somebody because then you wind up talking about football and they need to really be talking about the car crash.
Right.
They need to be talking about losing their mom or a hard time or something like that. And you can almost have too much of a conversation and forget to focus on the questions. It's really, really important thing I think you said there. And I think that's a great bullet point for this as advice to other filmmakers is you want to keep a natural conversation rolling, but you have to have another part of your brain that's like, okay, I need to segue into this question. There's all these cool little techniques. And I've been in situations when I was hired by an agency or hired by, another production company or whatever. And they're like, hey, we need you to come in and do a testimony for us. And it's just me. So I'm over there sweating my ass off, just setting up cameras and lights and tripods. And then you have to sit down and, talk
that
to
is
these people.
true.
And sometimes,
yes.
Depending on how serious, it could be lighthearted, but sometimes these things are emotional,
right.
and you're almost you feel like you're a therapist, and you're like, oh man, that's a big thing to process. And you look over, time code's good, still rolling camera, still rolling audio. They're not peaking, are they? Are they soft? Yeah. So sorry, your mom died.
Right.
So it's one of those things. You have to get really good at multitasking. I would say that's if I had any advice, you have to be good at multitasking because luckily on a lot of the sets that you and I are on now, we have a lot of people handling putting out all the fires, and you can focus one-on-one with a client. Yeah. But you know how it is when you got to watch everything at once.
Right.
It's very hard. You have to be somewhat of a juggler, Yeah,
and that's what I think this we're talking about more or less is more on the commercial side. But on the if you get in front of the camera on a film side, it's a little bit different. There's a little more polished of an actor. You obviously know the step process on that, with being with the script and the development stages and the readings and stuff.
Tell me about this, because I think this is really important too. You ever heard of I know you've heard this phrase, shoot with editing in mind. Now, this is different than saying fix it in post. Right. We're not saying fix it in post. We're saying shoot with editing in mind. Talk about that, because that's something I feel like, especially as somebody who's interviewing somebody or directing actors, you have to kind of edit in your head before you even get to the editing suite, right? So kind of describe your process of juggling that, right? Because you have to think about the edit, the final product, while you're capturing the raw.
Yeah, I'll talk about from a different perspective. On the commercial side, I do fall in that trap a lot. And I think when we've worked on projects, we're kind of, as we're putting together these scenes, we're cutting it in our head already. We're like, okay, well, we need to, frame it up this way, use this composition, use this lighting technique, because, it's going to hit on this mark. But I think in the film, and this is my opinion, if you're editing like that in your head when you're making a movie, I don't know if that's the best approach. I think it's great.
Okay.
So when you have the opportunity to work on films, and you know this, Jacob, it's like you have a little bit bigger budget, and I love the idea of an editor having fresh eyes on the project. Because like with me and you, a lot of times we go through on the commercial side or the documentary side, you don't have the luxury a lot of times with that type of budget. So it's like, everybody's wearing multiple hats. And so from my approach on the commercial side is completely different from the film, because on the film side, you're living as a director. I'm just speaking from the directing or the acting side. You're living with this project for quite some time, and it's great to have a new set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes on the on the deliverables, because if I'm sitting there thinking on the performance, oh, we need there's one thing to say that's a good take, with scripty and, marking that. But there's a second of like, all right, well, I'm going to, shoot this quickly or just to get the coverage on it, because I know we got to move on. But I like the more of the approach, kind of like how Nolan does. He doesn't sit in Video Village. He's out there with the actors and the performance, and you rarely see him on a monitor. I think most of the time, if I'm not mistaken, he's either looking at composition or he's looking at if it's in focus. But he's right there and engaged with the performance. And when you know this really well, is when you hire great talent and great crews, you trust them delivering their job. You don't want to micromanage. I've been on sets where the director is micromanaged and everybody's a little on edge. And then I've been on the extreme where it's too loose. You don't make your days, and I think there's a moment where and this is just coming from the directing side or the acting side, where you got to know what you have to have the plan. You work it out and your shot list in the beginning. And this is just speaking on the film side now. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around. But on the film side, you do your prep with the DP, with, let's just say you and I are on it and we're going through our shots. Obviously, we want to have some organicness to it, right? This is not set in stone, but at least you have that mental blocking as a director and a DP, right? How you're going to get your shots, how you're going to light it. And then if something isn't working, you make those adjustments. Or if you want to have something changed, then you make those adjustments. But you have that, you're dialed in because you do all the prep in the, in the pre-production.
You made a lot of really good points.
Did
there.
I? I don't know, man. I feel like I was rambling on.
No. I mean, that's, but it's all really good stuff. I ramble too, as y'all probably have seen, depending on how I edit these. But, that's actually a really interesting point. And at first, when you said you disagreed a little bit about that, I was kind of thinking like, okay, I want to hear this. And then you brought up a really good point because, it's been a long time since I've actually been on movie sets. I've actually been so, I guess, wrapped up in the commercial world of things and the documentaries and testimonial side that I've realized it's like, man, I think it was yesterday I was on a movie. The last time I was on a movie set was probably 8 years ago. And so that's a long time. And it's really interesting you say that. I guess I got so good at working as a one-man band or a skeleton crew operation, even like somewhat larger where there's, maybe 10 crew members on set or maybe a little more. But you're right about that. On the movie sets, everybody has got a role and everybody's professional. And it's really interesting you say that. And I think this is important for other filmmakers, especially ones coming up. You may aspire to be a motion picture feature film director. That's a different type of directing than working with clients. And that's what's really cool. When you step from that world into the commercial world, there's some overlap, right? But I don't see a lot of that overlap being, helpful. There's some things, but man, it's like two different jobs. Is really what it seems like to me. I mean, you can't act like a feature film director and make your days sometimes, if you're trying to get a perfect by the script performance from a testimony. And it's interesting. You have to be able to switch gears like that. And I think it is interesting.
It's a different animal. It's a different animal directing commercials as it is to even documentaries or film projects. It's absolutely. We often joke around about this, but I don't think my intent was ever, I loved acting and performing. I still do. Took a little hiatus from it so I felt I had to learn the details of how to be a director or, attempt to be a director. And, this is my journey is I had to kind of, completely try to remove myself from in front of the camera because it's, your brain's wired differently when you're looking at the technical side, the performance, the technical side, and then handling all the departments. And a perfect example, when we're doing commercials, there's nothing wrong with being a one-man band. A lot of times that's, you have to do that because first of all, it's like, you only can do what your budget allows you to, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I think you can learn a lot from that. And even, and I hope I'm not misquoting Christopher Nolan again, but, I think I saw an interview that he said on YouTube about, coming up, before he did Memento. And he said, I did industrials, but I learned every department, or at least I knew about every department. And I think that's a valuable asset to, put in your belt as a filmmaker, is to know, because when we first were doing this podcast, when we were starting this thing off and we had a little break, and which was a good break because we had the opportunity to work a lot, and we just put it on pause and we kind of came back to it. But I think working, learning, I had to force myself to learn all those departments. And I think it made me a better filmmaker because I'm not saying I'm an expert in all the departments, but I knew enough to have conversations with all, the gaffer, with the DP, just even knowing like latitude with the cameras, right? And what we're looking for far as like, lens choice and look and style. I mean, all that stuff, as an actor about 3 or 4 years ago, I had no idea had to have a dialogue with you about that. So I think it's made me a better filmmaker.
I think you're right. And that's, if you try to be great at everything, you wind up being, okay at everything. It's really like, and it's the moment you retire that you finally reach like the pinnacle of all the stats, as a filmmaker. It's like, because I consider everybody who's, in this industry and is trying to create, I'd say premium content. Let's just do a blanket statement. We're all filmmakers, but each filmmaker has different stats, right? Like we've worked with some filmmakers that like knew that was a camera and a lens and that was it. But they knew everything about audio. They knew what the different mics did, the different, the cardioid patterns and the way the placement of the mic, the mixing, the subtleties of the scoring. And it's like, they're an audio, high stats in audio. That was their thing, and then you have other filmmakers who they're filmmakers and I consider them a filmmaker. And then there's guys that could do animation really well, but couldn't find the power switch to an Arri camera if you put a gun to their head, or if you offered them $10 million, you'd be like, I think that's the battery, So I feel like everybody has their stats. If you try to do everything, that's a good way when you're starting off, do everything, get your hands on everything and be proficient and competent, just be competent and know your way around it, but then specialize. And then through specialization, necessity will determine, your next thing of, learning, your next topic of learning. Like in your case, acting and directing, that was your thing. You decided I'm going to buckle down and get great at that. And you did, and you are, and that was your channel. But in the process of becoming great at that, and we're all working to be great, and you do it until you die, right? So it's like
that's one thing great about what we do. We can do this until, look at Ridley Scott, look at all of them. They're pushing what? 80? But it's great because you love what you do, right?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. On that journey, you go on these little detours, like you just said, you did that. You were acting and directing here, and then the camera it's very alluring, and audio is interesting, but it's outside your peripheral. And then one day it's a roadblock, and you're like, damn, okay, to continue to get better as a director, as an actor, I've got to dive into that technical side a little bit.
And I had to dive in 100%. There was no halfway for me. I think us working together, there's a great, and I'm sure, like I said, you've worked with other directors, I've worked with other DPs. Everybody has a different workflow, right? And it's like, it's a joy to me it's that famous saying, like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, right? And for me too, it's like the great joy I have with, and I'm sure you can agree to this, with what we do is you're constantly learning, you're constantly challenging yourself. Because I'm like that actor director, where I'm never happy. I hate to say it like that, but I always want to keep pushing to get better, and I'm never like satisfied per se. Because same thing with acting. I look back and I'm like, oh, some of the stuff was cringy. It was hard to watch. Some of the earlier directing stuff, I said like, wow, I didn't even have an eye. I didn't even know I was looking for. I'm like, oh, that looks good, But now, as as we were saying earlier, it's like I can have these conversations with you, and then we could use our different skill sets, and we can come together and make a great product. And that's kind of what I love to do, is work with talented people that we all kind of come together, and it's like a family, like it's a film family. We all come together, and then it's like it's the movie feels so different than commercials, right? The movies, it's like you're with you kind of come together as a family. It's like dating, right? You're in that that beginning stages, and it's like nice, it's fun, and then you and then as it goes on, you're just starting to get worn down, right? And then by the end of it, you're like, let's just, I'm over, I'm ready to separate. But then you get sad when it's all gone. It's almost like a piece of you is gone, and then you have the when the film's completed, obviously everybody comes back together. But it's a different, from and this is coming from my perspective, commercial directing is just, it's different than film directing and or documentary. I have a little bit more experience as a director on the narrative side in documentaries than per se films or narrative films. But even on the documentary side, there's, I love telling a great story.
All right. So I think another really good question here is, how are you building a rapport with the person across from you in an interview setting, right? So let's say you're doing a documentary about who knows what, maybe you get access to like a federal penitentiary or something, and you're going to go interview a murderer. Well, you've hopefully, never murdered anybody. I mean, if you did, well, you're here now, so you did a good job. You got away with it. But like, let's say you're interviewing somebody with a life experience that is completely foreign to you. How do you build a bridge? How do you build connections, build a rapport, so that you can get the words out of their mouth that's going to further the overarching story here? Tell me about how that process is for you.
It's the relationship aspect. I feel but it starts in pre-production. I feel like, you got to be able to know like the overarching story. What are you trying to start? Where are you trying to get to? But also what gems are you trying to find within these stories to as they say, the secret sauce, right? And I think as an actor too, what we're always in search for with our character is like, what are we fighting for, right? What are the stakes? And I try to carry that over to some of the documentaries. Like, it can be, relationships. They're fighting for the relationships, or they're fighting for their kids, or they're fighting for their country. There has to be some type of internal conflict. And through that internal conflict, there has to be growth. And with that growth, it's like, okay, you can either grow positive or you can grow negative. I think with the documentaries, it's the same thing. It's just like, what are you trying to pull out? What are they fighting for? And is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or how is this going to be resolved? So it's almost like you're piecing the puzzle together in just like an act. Like the first act, it's, getting to know the environment, the structure. And then the second is the journey, the character's journey. And then once they get to the journey, it's like, okay, dark night of the soul, what to, save the cat. It's like, how are they going to react to when everything is crumbling around them? It could go positive or negative. And then what's the character or characters learning at the end? And I kind of relate that into every interview, quote unquote, in every documentary.
I got you. Okay, that was going to be my question. How do you integrate that? So are you, as you're sitting there interviewing somebody, are you kind of, I know you said a lot of it is pre-production as well. It sounds like you have to kind of build this map, this comprehensive three-dimensional view of your subject and understand what you're going into before you even get there. It's almost kind of like you're a private investigator before you even get on set. You know what they're going to say before they say it. You kind of anticipate. That's a really interesting approach.
Well, it's just like acting. You're an investigator as an actor, and what your character is, where they come from, what they're trying to do. You know what I mean? You're a detective. You're a detective.
Right. That's a really good way to look at it. It's your approach to that is very interesting. The times that I've had to interview people, I didn't quite go that same approach, but I like the way you're thinking. It actually opens my eyes up to it as well, because I kind of go into interviews more conversationally, like I would talk to people in real life. I've had a lot of jobs. I've worked in a lot of industries, and I feel like I've lived many different lives crammed into this one, and it's weird because I've never really stuck with anything outside of film long enough to really make it a lifelong journey. But I've dipped my toes into so many different industries that when I'm sitting across from somebody interviewing them, I feel like my first thing to do is be relatable. How can I be in this person's just magically appear inside their circle of friends or family or whatever? And I'll explain it like this, or even colleagues. I interviewed this one guy who worked for a refinery, and I don't know anything about refineries. That's the one job I haven't had yet, and and it's almost like these jobs I have are little excursions. They're little ways for me to go do like fact-finding missions. Right. But I do know they're dealing with a dangerous job, and I do know they're dealing with precision and metering, and so they're using equipment to measure their processes. And I know there's an element of dealing with people in a dangerous environment, and there's all these different elements to the job. So I have a rough outline and understanding of what they're doing, and then I ask them questions to build a better picture, and I try to almost talk to them and pull out really detailed information about the topic and try to get them thinking about things in a very nerdy kind of way, because that's how I am. I'm nerdy. So I'm always trying to relate to people on a very nerdy and technical level, even with emotions, right? And trying to kind of analyze things. I get very analytical in my process. And I think through that, the things you're talking about reveal themselves and this is weird because I'm having an epiphany in this conversation. It's almost kind of like you go into it looking for their arc, looking for the growth, looking for all this. I go into it trying to analyze their decisions, their emotions, and their actions. Like, what did they decide to do? How did they feel about it? And what did they actually do? And then use that and kind of reverse engineer the thing that your method. So I think we're like two parallel roads going to the same location, but they're different sceneries. It's so weird because.
But hey, as long as it gets there, that's all that matters.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting though, and that's a cool thing to talk about. In this conversation, we're trying to help other filmmakers find their voice and their strengths and develop as a filmmaker, and while we're doing the same, right? And so I think it's important to realize, you can listen to anybody in the world's advice about filmmaking, but really it's your journey, and you have to figure out what works for you, and it has to work for the client, it has to work for the story, it has to work for the brand, it has to work for the script, whatever your case may be. That has to be the focus. However you get there, that's your unique voice, right? That's your unique method.
You couldn't have said it better.
All of the things. Yeah, I mean, cool. I guess I got lucky. That came out really well. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, that's why no director in Hollywood is really the same. Right. That's what makes Nolan different from Tarantino. They both direct and produce great movies, but it's like
and Spielberg said exactly what you're saying. Really? In an interview, he's like, "Don't try to be me. You're bringing who you are to the table. And
Yeah.
There's only one Spielberg, so why even try
Right.
to, one Tarantino. So don't
Right.
you're like, if you try to compare yourself to someone like that, or I wouldn't even know where to start. I wouldn't even start because I'm like, well, just look at what
Right.
they've done, But that's it.
Exactly.
You just got to bring who you are to the table, man. And
Yeah.
we all fail. We all make mistakes. And it's so true what they said. I was like, when I was hearing these things of like, you learn the most when you fail. And I'm like, oh, I'm tired of hearing that. But it's actually the truth.
I'm tired of
Yeah.
failing.
When you make those mistakes, and something that on low budget filmmaking that we all have to overcome sometimes is like you solve problems creatively, not with a checkbook. And that to me,
Yeah.
you learn such valuable lessons in those times, of like, hey, we don't have a checkbook to write this scene. How are we going to solve this situation? And you most of the time you do it, and it's great, and that's
Yeah.
what happens when you all come together. Like always use sports analogies, right? You always come together as a team, and usually when all these great minds come together, you can solve some wonderful things.
It's a really good point. And I think that's important too.
Yeah.
All these filmmakers, we're in a I always said that we are in an unnecessarily guarded profession. And I do believe the emotional element of filmmaking creates an environment where people instinctively get guarded
Mm,
because, if everybody can buy the same camera and lenses, what makes you
right.
special? So if you figure something out, a lot of people don't want to share it or, you know, include other filmmakers in on it because they feel like they may lose um, their secret sauce,
Yeah.
or they may get ripped off, or they may, somebody might steal a client or something. And I noticed that a lot. That is a very common trope. We see that a lot. Filmmakers are guarded, but
Yeah.
like you said, if you come together as a team and you are firm and I guess I would say your conviction is
Hmm.
strong with your own method and your own voice, then everybody else is their own. And if they're trying to copy you, that's flattery and that's great, but
Yeah.
it's robbing them of their own journey. And
Yeah.
so, what you really want to do is put yourself, I think, my advice would be put yourself around filmmakers who are secure.
Hmm.
Insecure filmmakers, um, really bring out the worst in a production. So if you find filmmakers who are secure in their profession, secure in their talents, secure in their own, um, you know, voice, that's, man,
Hmm.
just to add on what you said, that team is so strong at
Yeah.
that point because, everybody's in their element and they're not
And
threatened.
most of the
And that's a
time
really,
when we're sorry to interrupt, but most of the
no,
time
that's it.
when you're working with talented people, everybody kind of knows their lane, right? And they want to stay in their lane and do exceptionally well in their lane. They're not
Right.
trying to
Yes.
tell the director how he should, direct, and the director's not telling the DP about constant different light shifts or compositions, right? You
Yeah.
talk about that and with your shots and before actors get on set and all that stuff. But anyways,
It has to be
yeah,
trust,
yeah, absolutely.
that's
Yep.
important.
Cool.
And trust yourself on your filmmaking journey, and invest in yourself and find your own voice. And you know what? Um, tell us your methods, tell us what you do. How do you interview people? What are your go-to techniques? Or what are you doing that's so different that's working well for you? If you have any of those ideas and you want to share with this filmmaking community what those are, let us know. Tell us,
Absolutely.
and let's grow a community here and see what we learn. I think it could be pretty cool. It'd be really cool. So, Nathan, before we sign off, man, what anything else you want to add?
I think that's it. You covered everything, and it's all about.
You covered
And you
everything.
covered everything. I think you said it right. You're finding your voice. You bring who you are, your skills and your talents to your production, and hiring talented people around you as a unit, as a team. You're going to have great support, and that's what it's about.
We appreciate you checking out the podcast today. And if you want to see more of these, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification, and you'll be notified, obviously, when we release more of these. If you're on the go, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and iHeartRadio podcast is on all 4 of those as well. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.